He's been doing charts for the past 7. He has studied under Alan Oken, Jeffrey Green, and Guy Spiro. Some of us know Guy Spiro, known in the Chicago area. He is the owner of Soul Rise Astrology. So let's welcome Brian.
I began studying with Guy Spiro in 2007, and and of course, as I'm sure you know, he passed on. I forget the exact year, but not too many years after that. And it was a real privilege to get my foundation with him. And then I studied the work of Jeffrey Wolf Green very deeply. Evolutionary astrology is the paradigm that he created. And then for the past couple of years, I've been in a one-to-one mentorship with Alan Oken, which has been pretty great. So thank you all for coming. It's great to be here and see you all. My topic tonight is dual sign and dual planet rulership. My talk has morphed a little bit from my original idea. The idea was going to be when a planet traditionally rules 2 signs, like Mars rules Aries and Scorpio, what does it say about the planet when we incorporate both signs together? In other words, we tend to talk about Mars ruling Aries, and we think of Mars as an Aries planet, which of course it is. But if we accept that Mars also rules Scorpio, how do we fill in Mars and understand a deeper dimension of Mars when we bring the Scorpio factor into Mars? And then the same with the other planets. And then, so I'll still be talking about that, but I also, as I was going, I brought in outer planet rulerships as well. So I'll be talking about signs that have 2 planetary rulers, Scorpio, Aquarius, and Pisces. Is everybody here familiar with the concept of rulership, when the planets rule particular signs? And in traditional astrology, as you may know, let's see, we'll just move on here. Start talking about that. Okay, so dual sign rulership refers to a planet ruling 2 signs. So Mars rules Aries and Scorpio. And dual planet rulership or co-rulership is referring to a sign that is ruled by 2 planets. So Saturn and Uranus ruling Aquarius, for example. From this, 2 essential concepts have emerged. And these ideas are ideas that I've been working on and developing. I won't say they're completely fully developed, but they've been working. These ideas that I'll be presenting come from the teachings that I've taken in, and sort of a synthesis of what I've learned from my various teachers and studies. But there's also some personal intuition that's coming through some of these ideas that I'll present. One of these ideas is integration. What I mean by that is that planet ruling 2 signs must integrate the qualities it shares from both signs, it shares with both signs, to be fully and most healthily expressed. What I mean is, to express Mars in its fullest, strongest, most healthy way, it must express qualities of both Aries and Scorpio, or in the case of Saturn, Capricorn and Aquarius. And then another idea is that, the other concept is inner to outer. A sign ruled by 2 planets points to a process by which we enter the outer planet through the doorway of the inner planet. So I'll be talking about this and what this means. I'll be giving examples of this. But the idea is that the inner planet is, in a sense, a doorway to the outer planet. We enter Uranus through Saturn. We enter Pluto through Mars. And as I say, I'll be explaining that more as we go on. Okay. So one thing I want to say about planetary rulerships is that there's not exactly a consensus out there on what planets rule what signs. Robert Hand wrote in the 1980s about how Mars is a terrible ruler for Scorpio. Jupiter is not a good ruler for Pisces, and we should give that definitely to Neptune. And he even said that Mercury is a terrible ruler for Virgo. And so he, at that point of his career, was leaning towards the outer planets and possibly even looking at some of the larger asteroids as rulers for even suggests Earth as a ruler for Taurus. I've been attending Robert Hand lectures since 2014, and today he says emphatically, outer planets do not rule signs. You have to use the traditional rulerships. So, even someone as great as Robert Hand can change his mind through his career, Jeffrey Wolf Green, Evolutionary Astrology, uses the outer planet rulerships exclusively. So Saturn has nothing to do with Aquarius. Mars has nothing to do with Scorpio. I don't agree with that. I am more in alignment with Alan Oken, who integrates both. And he will often talk about Scorpio in the context of Mars, as well as Pluto. Okay. Okay, so a couple of terminology here. Okay. Planets have an energetic affinity with the signs that they rule. They are considered strong and well placed in those signs, but also reflect the qualities of those signs. Energetic affinity is a term that I borrow from Alan Oken. And you can perhaps understand what it means, but planets have an energetic affinity with the signs that they rule. So Mars has an energetic affinity with Aries and with Scorpio. And if you see Mars in a chart, Mars is in Aries, well, you know that Mars is well placed, it's strong, it's activated within a field of Aries that is natural to it, and it can express itself strongly. And that idea, of course, goes way, way back, at least to Ptolemy, that planets in the signs that they rule are strong and well placed. But a ruler is also a dispositor, meaning it pulls the energy of whatever it rules into the house and sign that it lives. Another way to say that, this is Alan Oken, the position of the dispositor takes the energy of the dispositive planet or house forward and conditions its use. That is to say that if you're looking at a chart that has Sagittarius on the 6th house, then there are some things you can guess from that, or that you can get from that symbolism. So someone with the 6th house on Sag, maybe they work in travel, or they work in a higher learning institution. There's some Sagittarian quality to their day-to-day work and day-to-day routines. They probably aren't too consistent maybe with their daily routines. But then you would look to Jupiter, since Jupiter rules Sagittarius, and let's say Jupiter's in Taurus in the 11th house. Jupiter will disposit that 6th house into the 11th. So the 6th house energy is expressing itself or being taken forward and conditioned within the 11th house. So let's say Taurus 11th. So perhaps Jupiter and Taurus, maybe they make pretty good money doing it, and it's in the 11th house. So their work brings them into communities, large communities of like mind, and perhaps the travel dimension brings them into many different kind of global communities, or they commit themselves to some kind of service, perhaps an international service, 6th house service, international Sagittarius, from yearning towards social values, Taurus 11th house, group values, community values. So all of that to express an example of how a planet disposits either a house or another planet elsewhere in the chart. Any house cusp on or planet in a dual-ruled sign has two dispositors, an inner dispositor, inner planet dispositor, and outer planet dispositor. So the house or planet is being worked through or expressed in two other places. Let's say someone has Mercury in Aquarius. So Saturn and Uranus will be both dispositing that Mercury. That Mercury energy will be taken forward and conditioned in two other places in the chart. And finally, planets ruling two signs disposit two houses. So Mars will disposit the house that is on Aries as well as the house that is on Scorpio. Okay. We're now looking at dual sign rulerships, okay, which would be outer planets. Traditional astrology, I'm getting ahead of myself. Dual sign rulerships refers, in essence, to traditional rulership, where every planet except the sun and the moon has rulership over two signs. So how does dual sign rulership enrich our understanding of the planets? What do we sometimes miss if we don't take both signs into account? For example, we tend to favor one sign over the other. So Mars is taught far more in relation to Aries than to Scorpio. Mars is, of course, a lot more like Aries than Scorpio. But Scorpio still informs us quite a bit on the nature, function, and purpose of Mars, as we'll see. Integration of both signs that the planet rules is beneficial for healing. If one sign is not integrated, the lower qualities of the other emerge. That is to say, for example, Mars without Scorpio becomes more like a dysfunctional Aries. It needs a balance of the other sign. Okay. This is one of two charts that I'm showing you, or diagrams I'm showing you, that is indicating the basis for the traditional rulerships, why the planets were given the signs they were given. And so this is all explained by Ptolemy in the Tetrabiblos, 1st century AD or so. And the essence of it is that the moon and the sun are given rulership of Cancer and Leo because the moon and the sun, of course, are the brightest objects in the sky, and Cancer and Leo in the northern hemisphere are the hottest, brightest months of the year. There's the most sunlight, and so that is the reason that correlation is made. So then we start with Mercury taking Gemini and Virgo, and you see that you can see the kind of fanning out and then back in that occurs here. And Mercury taking Gemini and Virgo, Venus taking Taurus, Libra, Mars, Aries, Scorpio, etc. And you see that that's in planetary order. I don't believe the ancient Greeks knew how far the planets actually were, but this mirrors the speed at which these planets move through the sky. Mercury is, as you may know, is never more than one sign away from the sun. I want to say, I don't remember what the actual degree amount is. Say again?
28.
28, thank you. So it's never more than 28 degrees from the sun. So it's always within one sign. So it makes sense, it makes sense that Mercury would get the signs that are one sign away from Cancer and Leo. Venus is never two signs away from the sun. 45?
I'm going to say 46 or 48.
Okay. Yeah, sounds about right. So Venus is never more than two signs away from the sun. So it is two signs away. Its ruled signs are two signs away from Cancer and two signs away from Leo. Okay. The rest of the planets, of course, can be anywhere. Okay, and also because Saturn's all the way up here, these months being the hottest, warmer months, these months are, of course, the coldest, and are therefore a fit for Saturn, being representing cold and cold things, rigid things, frozen things. Okay. Now, this next chart is an attempt to express what I call the qualitative basis for the rulerships. So we've looked at a very sort of visually symmetrical way of understanding why the rulerships are what they are. But there's another level of understanding which I'm calling qualitative. And I'll try to explain this the best I can. I don't know how clear this diagram is that I just invented. But, so here we have the moon and the sun ruling Cancer and Leo, as we know. Okay, starting with Mercury. Mercury ruling Gemini and Virgo. Gemini and Virgo, of course, are the adjacent signs to Cancer and Leo. They make no Ptolemaic aspect. There is no aspect between Gemini and Cancer or between Virgo and Leo. And Ptolemy would have said there's no aspect here. These signs do not really communicate. We today might say there's a semi-sextile. But back then that wasn't considered a real aspect. So Mercury is the one planet that, and anybody correct me if I'm wrong on this, but my understanding of Mercury is that it's not considered specifically benefic or malefic. It can actually swing either way. And Mercury, connected to Hermes, has a quality of androgyny. It's kind of, it can swing in any direction. So it's fitting that it would get these signs adjacent to Cancer and Leo in the sense that there's no aspect being made. You can't really say whether it's quote good, bad, benefic, malefic. Then we get to the signs ruled by Venus, Taurus, and Libra. Venus, of course, has the moniker of lesser benefic. And you could say that the sextile aspect, Libra makes a sextile to Leo, Taurus makes a sextile to Cancer. So you could say that the sextile is a kind of lesser benefic aspect, if you will. And so it's fitting. So what I'm saying here is the quality of Venus as a lesser benefic is resonant with the quality of the sextile, which is a lesser benefic aspect. So that's why I call this the qualitative basis. So moving on to Mars, Mars being the lesser malefic makes squares. Aries makes a square to Cancer, Scorpio a square to Leo. Jupiter is the greater benefic, so it gets the trines. Pisces to Cancer, Sag to Leo. Saturn, the greater malefic, gets the oppositions. Capricorn to Cancer, Aquarius to Leo. Is that all clear?
Yeah.
Great, thank you. Okay, so looking a little bit at dual sign rulerships. Okay. Mercury rules Gemini and Virgo. It tends to be discussed more in association with Gemini than Virgo. This is my experience. What I read, what I hear people say. Mercury is more of a Geminian energy than a Virgoan energy. Give me just a second. We might consider more than just Gemini communication. Also, Virgo synthesis, sorting through daily routines, bodily care. As air and earth, Mercury is mind and body. So Gemini, one way to think of Mercury as it relates to Gemini and Virgo, Gemini can be very fleeting, jumping from one experience to another experience, but not really going deep into anything. And not really not necessarily examining, but taking in data, taking in information, and jumping onto whatever is the next shiny object. I'm Gemini rising, so I have some authority, I think, on this. But Virgo, of course, wants to sort of microscope in, get in there, look at the details, analyze, right? Slow things down and get focused in. And so what can happen with Gemini, if Mercury, I'll say it like this, if Mercury is being expressed in a primarily Geminian fashion, it's like I'm jumping from opinion to opinion, and I really don't have any of my own. Oh, that sounds like a good, oh yeah, I understand that idea. Yeah, that's great. I'm totally in alignment with that. Someone else comes around with a completely different idea. I'm totally, agree with that, So no center, just shifting with the winds, with the air of Gemini, right? So Virgo brings more of a stability. Let me take this idea and that idea, synthesize them, distill them down, and discern what works for me. And thereby express my own opinion or my own idea, right? As a synthesis of the ideas that I've taken in. And that's Virgo. That's Virgo's function relative to Mercury. So the square relationship between Gemini and Virgo, the mind wants to fly, the body wants to be grounded. Okay, the mind should be still enough to see to the needs of Virgo while also quick enough to not get stuck in ruts overly critical from too narrow a focus. So kind of what I'm saying there is a Mercury that's overly Virgo, of course, we probably know what that's like. Super focused on the details, can't see the forest for the trees, and criticizing, it's just not good enough, it's never good enough, right? So that Virgo needs some Gemini, needs to open the windows, get some fresh air, get some new ideas circulating, and to step out of that negativity and realize, there's a lot more to this than just this one detail I'm focused on. Okay, there goes Mercury. I try to do these transitions to kind of fit the planet in some ways. Mercury's very bouncy. Okay, Venus. Okay, Venus rules Taurus. Taurus, our essential needs and the values that arise from them. Libra, the needs of others and our response to them. Okay. So how are core values and essential needs linked with relationships? Objectifying our own needs helps us better attend to the needs of others. So Taurus represents survival as a biological form and the things that we need to survive comfortably. And then our values, of course, arise from the things that we need. And if we've got the things that we need, then we move into something more of an aesthetic, quality of Taurus representing the finer things, the sensual things, the things that give us a feeling of fullness, if you will. But one of our basic needs, of course, is relationship. We cannot survive without others. We need others to survive. So Venus's dual rulership of Taurus and Libra links relationships to essential needs. You can see how they work together. Intimacy, Libra, helps us to clarify our own needs, Taurus, as we bump up against the needs of our partner. Self-relationship is enhanced as a result. A more highly developed self-relationship leads to stronger relationships with others. So we could say that Venus, that is all Libra and no Taurus, is very focused on the needs of others, and needs to be needed, and needs to be liked. If I'm out of touch with my own needs, then others' needs I may project my needs onto others. Others' needs become more important than my own because I'm trying to find my needs met in your needs or their needs, right? So, so that expression of Venus needs some healthy Taurus, needs some grounding, needs some, hey, look within, cultivate. Taurus is self-relationship, so cultivate a relationship with yourself so that you know what your own personal needs are, you know how to respond to them, and therefore you don't have the need to cling to others' needs, if that makes sense. So I see clients, I've had a number of clients who will come in and they'll be complaining about relationship issues. I haven't had a partner in 3 years, or I whatever it is, or I've always had bad luck, bad problems with partners that I attract. And so my question is always, how are you handling your self-relationship? If you're not in a relationship, this is a great time to work on your relationship to yourself. And love yourself. Be in touch with your deeper needs and the being inside yourself. And the more you respond to your own needs and learn to love yourself, the more loving the partner you can attract into your life. Okay. Venus.
I just want to say, the first band we had with the Mercury show, the square relationship between Gemini and Virgo, and then Venus is really quincunx.
Yes, indeed.
Relationship. So it's very interesting that these estrangements, by square and quincunx, actually can be growth inhibiting. Inducing.
Yes, indeed.
So that what's ordinarily thought of as a stress, stress or liability or deficit, could actually be, if you're looking at it from a growth or a growth point of view, can actually be an asset.
Absolutely.
If you're looking at it from how to develop yourself.
Yeah.
To go from ego to soul or something.
Yes.
Is that embedded in this?
Yes. What is your name again? I'm sorry.
Norm.
Thank you for raising those points. I actually intended to say something to that effect earlier, and I think I left it out. Absolutely. I actually don't personally give credence to the benefic, malefic labels. I think any planet can be experienced or expressed any number of ways, whether we call it negative or positive. And that can be indicated by how the planet is conditioned in the chart, but it's ultimately how the individual is working with that energy. And so absolutely, a square, a quincunx, or any kind of uncomfortable aspect can induce a great deal of growth. And of course, it is dependent on the individual taking a look at it and willing to say, oh, this, whether they're using astrology or not, this energy, this tension is in me. It's up to me to resolve it, or it's up to me to find a good use for it.
So it's attitude.
Yes.
Your attitude for it.
Yes.
Otherwise, it could be a point of suffering, great suffering.
Absolutely. Yep, absolutely. Thank you for raising that one. All right. Now we're looking at dual planet rulerships, and now we'll be looking at combinations or integrations of inner planet, outer planet with Scorpio, Aquarius, Pisces. So, with the discovery of the outer planets, many astrologers have accepted their co-rulership over signs. But what do we miss if we ignore outer planet rulerships? What do the outer planets tell us about the signs they rule? Excuse me. It's arguable that some qualities of the outer planets do not play out in the signs that they rule, and vice versa. So, Uranus isn't a completely Aquarian energy, and Aquarius is not a completely Uranian energy. They're two different things. Planets and signs are two different things. In this example, Uranus and Aquarius are very different things, but they do share some qualities. There is, again, an energetic affinity between Aquarius and Uranus, as well as between Aquarius and Saturn. And in my experience, in my experience, dispositorship of outer planets does work. So wherever Aquarius is in your chart, when you look to Uranus, now you just try this for yourself, see if it works. But look to Uranus and see if you can find a way that Uranus is, in a sense, pulling or expositing that Aquarian energy into the house and sign where it is, and its aspects. See if you can integrate that idea that Uranus is dispositing Aquarius, for example, or Neptune is dispositing Pisces. In my experience, it works. Okay, so moving on. Outer planet rulerships work, but they work best in relation to the inner planet ruler. Okay. So I think what I'm trying to say with that is that if you're using outer planets as rulers for Scorpio, Aquarius, Pisces, don't throw out the inner planets. I find that it works best if you use both. The outer planets represent transcendence from the conventionality of the inner planets, or the movement of consciousness beyond materialism towards unity of life and ensoulment of the universe. So now we're starting to get a bit esoteric, which, when you're talking about the outer planets, that's the territory that they're in, or that they represent, where we have left the boundaries, the physical, mundane boundaries of Saturn, and now we're entering the unseen, invisible dimensions of the outer planets and of the greater cosmos. Okay, so the movement of consciousness beyond materialism. The essence of materialism is the universe is dead. Apart from, everything in it except humans and some other life forms is completely inert matter. There is no soul, there is no consciousness other than what happens to emerge from certain life forms like human beings. To me, that is an insane idea. And so the idea of awakening to transcendence, and I'm picking words to explain things that are very difficult to really categorize or explain, but a consciousness of transcendence is a consciousness that has awakened to the universe and everything in it being alive. The planets are alive, the stars are alive. This table is alive. This table has consciousness. Every photon, has some form of consciousness, not one that we can relate to, but there is a form of consciousness that is flowing through everything in the universe. And that's what I mean by ensoulment. And I highly recommend, you may have heard of it, it's a pretty popular book called Cosmos and Psyche by Richard Tarnas. Fabulous book that does two primary things. One is it's a beautiful defense, if you will, of astrology. He looks at the course of human history from the axial age all the way to today, and he corroborates major social global changes with outer planet alignments. And his research is impeccable, and how he's able to put this all together. It's a very detailed book. It's on Cosmos and Psyche. Yeah.
One of my favorites, I agree.
Say it.
One of my favorites, I agree with you.
Yes. And I love his way of using astrology to express this idea of an ensouled universe. And that if we assume, right now, the predominant assumption is, again, the universe is dead. All matter is lifeless. But if instead, and that's just a biased assumption, but if we instead take the biased assumption that everything has consciousness, then it completely revolutionizes our cosmic view and makes it very easy to see how astrology can work. So that's my little talk on that. Okay. When a sign shares rulership with an outer planet, the two planets share a common growth process. The inner planet leads to the outer, or the mundane leads to the transcendent. The inner planet will often refer to how we enter the transcendent domain of the outer planet. Another way to say that is that the inner planet is the doorway to the outer planet. And I'll explain some ideas about that in a moment. So what do I mean by mundane? Mundane meaning day-to-day human experience, what we can easily observe with our personal direct contact with life. And it is normal human living. Transcendent, moving through and beyond normal human experience, seeing life as an impersonal dance of archetypes. I've practiced so many ways to try and explain this. What my perspective is on this. By transcendence, I'm referring to a awakening of consciousness that is fully connected to and aware of what it means to be human and to have an ego, but is also aware that the ego is not me, and is not as susceptible to attachment or identification with the mundane experiences that happen day to day. It's as if an aspect of consciousness is always kind of out here, observing, very impersonal, seeing everything that happens as a dance of energies, of archetypes, you know? And that distance isn't it isn't an unhealthy distance that simply refuses to feel anything. It's more like a perspective that is distant but connected through an energy of love. I experience this dance of energy moment to moment with my heart, with love, with compassion. That still means I might have to wield a sword. That still means I might have to kill for a higher good. But that transcendent consciousness is aware and is projecting love into the situation and is aware of why it is happening. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Okay. This is coming a lot from my work with Alan Oken, and so I think I'm just starting to get there. Okay, so we need both. Without the mundane, we can't have any effect on the world, ineffectual. But without the transcendent, we remain stuck to our personal wounds and traumas because we have no way to impersonalize it, no way to objectify and understand why is this happening. Oh, okay, let me work with this instead of fighting against it all the time, whatever the wound or drama is. So getting into some planet sign combinations here. Okay. So what I'm going to attempt to explain is how Aries and Scorpio both play out through Mars, and how Mars is the doorway to Pluto. So Aries is the battles we enter into, the development of our warrior nature through bravery or fierceness, among other things. Scorpio, sex, death, transformation, the common keywords for Scorpio. Our journeys through the underworld, where we face our shadows and learn to dance with them. It's an important quality to Scorpio because, as I'm sure all of us know, when you are faced with your own shadow, it can be scary as hell. And the humans have all kinds of ways to react to that. Like, I'm just not going to go there. No, I'm going to put that back in the box. Or, well, that's not me, that's you. I'm just going to project it all on you. You're the evil one, But facing our shadow and realizing that we don't have to, our work isn't to kill it or to hide it. Even when we look out into some of the things we just see out in the world right now, even in our own country. There's some pretty unpleasant stuff coming up to the surface. And our work is not to banish it, throw it all, throw the evildoers in jail or kill them all or whatever. Our work is, let's look at this, let's inspect this, let's dance with the energy. What is this teaching us or telling us? And gain some wisdom and some real transformation as a result. So, Mars integration. Without Scorpio, Aries impulsiveness reigns because Aries acts quickly, doesn't care to stick around, so commitment is lost. Yeah. So Aries wants to get in and get out. No patience, no commitment. But what Aries, if you imagine a soldier, a medieval soldier, with a big sword, and he's full of bloodlust, and he's gonna rush into that battle for his love or for his king or some greater ideal, and then once he enters that battle, sees everybody getting chopped to pieces, and says, "Whoa, I'm backing out of this is really scary," So that's a purely Aries Mars. I got to rush, but once I realize how much is at stake, I'm backing away. Right? So Aries needs that Scorpio energy to see it through, all the way through. Whereas if Mars is without Aries, the Mars energy can get stuck in resentment and stewing over pots of revenge, where somebody abused me and I'm just holding on to it. I'm not doing anything about it. I'm not taking any Aries initiative to do something about it. I'm just holding on to it. Scorpio just get like really stuck, fixed in that dark energy. But what is that person doing? They're just poisoning themselves. Rather than what they think they might be doing, which is projecting poison at the person who they perceive hurt them. They're just poisoning themselves. And what can happen is Mars that is very Scorpio without Aries can also impulsively penetrate too deeply, leaving us drowning in shadow. This resentment's been stewing in me for so long, and I can't take it anymore. I'm going to pull out my sword and and now I've killed somebody. Extreme example, but I've killed somebody, or I've insulted somebody, or I've humiliated somebody. And now I step back and realize, oh my God, what did I just do? I really hurt this person. And now I have to deal with my remorse, and now I have to make it up to them. Boy, that's pretty heavy. So that's Mars penetrating too deeply because I've held on to too much resentment. Whereas if I just tapped them on the shoulder and said, look, I'm sorry, I just had this feeling, it's been bothering me, what you said to me last year, or whatever. Maybe if I just said a few words about it, we could clear it and it would be done. Okay, so Mars needs initiative as well as protectiveness and depth. Okay, inner to outer, meaning Mars is the gateway to Pluto. So the house cusp on Scorpio indicates an area where we might rush into something, Mars, that requires a much longer commitment to Pluto, resulting in a fundamental transformation. One obvious example of this is Mars is the sex drive and Pluto is raising the child, which is going to transform your life. So there's an impulse, and we can rush into something from that impulse. But that may very well take us into a process that we now have to work through for a very long time. But by working through that process, we grow, we develop, we go through, perhaps it's something like, and it's not, not whether it's good or bad, because we're talking about Mars, and we talk about going into battle. And, well, sure, there's going into battle, and let's say I survive it. Well, first I'm facing my fear. I have to see my fear all the way through in that situation. But then, you know, how have I been scarred? You know, PTSD. You know, I'm living with this trauma now, and I have to go through a long process of healing that if I want to develop my consciousness. And that's Pluto going deep into those wounds and healing them through the process of walking through that underworld.
So Brian, the
Yes.
speed of the planet here comes in two. Mars is faster moving than
Yes.
Pluto,
Yes.
so it leaves the territory quicker. Well, Pluto plows along,
That's
day by
right.
degree, where the commitment and the growth occurs.
Yeah. Yeah.
I think this is
Yeah.
part of the dynamic. the speed.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, if you look at, you know, how Pluto transits your chart, you know, Pluto can take many, many years to get through a particular house. I've had Pluto transiting my 8th house since 2008. And boy, have I been through the underworld, you know. That's why I can talk about it, I think. But yes, so Pluto, just by transit, will indicate long-term processes. Yeah. There they go. On fire and burning away. Okay. I was trying to be entertaining. You don't want to be too dry, you know. Okay, so moving on to Sagittarius, Pisces, Jupiter, Neptune. Okay, so Sagittarius, the search for truth, higher meaning, and intuition synthesized from facts. Can you guys see that okay? I know it's a little small. Yeah, I'm sorry I don't have a way to blow that up, but I don't think.
Yes.
Um,
Squinting works.
Okay. You're welcome.
Squeeze to the lens.
Okay. Well, and so you know, at the end of this presentation, I'll be giving you a link to download the slides.
Oh.
Yeah. So you don't even have to. I should have said that in the beginning. I'm sorry. But you'll remember it more now.
That's true.
You're ready. Okay. Sagittarius, the search for truth, higher meaning, and intuition synthesized from facts. I'll say more about Sagittarius in a moment. Pisces, surrender to the essence of life, living the here and now, unbound to the past or future. Devotion to spirituality, upstream fish, or sensual addiction, downstream fish. Pisces, in probably the healthiest sense, brings a connection to something greater than ourselves. So that might be spirituality, faith in a higher power, an ideal based on compassion and desire for unity. That's Pisces in the healthiest sense. And I would say that Pisces in a healthy sense represents the ability to experience life as both real and a dream. It's both, you know, a real experience and it's Maya, it's illusion. And that is not an easy place to find yourself. In other words, that is not an easy realization to have. You can maybe intellectualize it, but to actually live that experience takes a great deal of effort, spiritual work, and you know, learning what it means to allow the ego to dissolve or to allow the body to dissolve and not have an attachment to it. Boy, that's, you know, that's pretty advanced stuff in my book. Okay. Oops. All right. I'll just read the third bullet here. This is a quote from Robert Hahn. Jupiter represents the reaching out of people to reincorporate as much of the external world as possible into themselves, possibly in order to recreate the feeling of oneness felt in the earliest period of life. I think there's a lot to unpack from that quote. I actually really love that quote. Because first of all, it refers to Jupiter as an integrating force. And I think that that's a quality of Jupiter that isn't talked about much. Sure, we talk about expansion and opportunity and good things and the king bestowing gifts, and that's all valid Jupiter stuff. But the Jupiter drive is to go out into the world, experience new things, completely new, completely foreign things, for the purpose of incorporating the world into the self. If I haven't experienced it, it's unknown. It's not a part of me. But if I go live it for a while, then it becomes a part of me, and I become a part of it. And that develops a feeling, cultivates a feeling of oneness with the world, even with the cosmos. And if I'm doing this on an intellectual level, if I'm studying philosophy, another Jupiter pursuit, I'm incorporating new ideas, new ways of thinking and approaching life. So I really like that idea of Jupiter as an integrating force. But then he refers to oneness. Jupiter is trying to recreate oneness. And there's Neptune, there's Pisces. Yes. Because if I have not integrated a healthy Jupiter function, I'll say this. If I don't have a way to integrate myself with the world, integrate the world into me, then if I'm trying to bypass that and just get to Neptune and experience oneness without really experiencing life, then I can end up just in confusion, in Neptunian confusion. That's not to say that we have to go travel to a bunch of foreign countries and have all these adventures. But Jupiter is operating for all of us in some way. There's some adventure that we are on, even if it's just the adventure of living my day-to-day life. And when I look back or when I take my life in total, it is a completely unique experience relative to the one consciousness. It's as if God's Jupiter function is living itself out. God's Jupiter function is functioning by living each one of us as a completely new experience. Does that make sense? Each one of us, even if we're next door neighbors, our lives can be completely different and completely different universes. That was good insight. Okay.
Yeah. It was good.
God's Jupiter function. The Jupiter of God is functioning through us by living a completely unique life experience. Does that make sense?
Yes, so God's Jupiter is living through us as an individual experience.
That's right. Yeah, it's like God's like, I want to have a bunch of crazy, adventurous experiences, so I'm going to manifest all these souls, and live through each of them.
That makes sense from a reincarnation viewpoint.
Sure,
as well.
absolutely. Yeah. Did something just?
Yes.
Okay. Everything seems to be. Oh, that's the fan. Okay. But yes, thank you. Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Okay.
It's like parents living through their children's dreams, something like that.
Parents living through their children.
Dreams.
Oh, I see. Yeah.
Manifesting something you wanted to see the child. Oh, got it.
Yeah, okay, beautiful, lovely, yeah. And that's a wonderful example. So if you didn't hear, she's saying how a parent can in a sense have an experience through the child. They can experience a dream of their own when their child achieves the dream, if that's about correct, something like that, yeah. So what I love about that is how it shows that it's possible to have a vicarious experience. I mean, that might sound in some ways negative if I'm trying to live vicariously through someone, and that's creating some deceptive attachment to that person. But if I'm simply, with my heart open, observing another person's experience, I can actually have that experience as well. And of course, parents and children are very tightly bound, so. Okay, Okay, Jupiter integration. Without Pisces, Jupiter can become a Sagittarian wild or crazy horse, never taking anything seriously. Without Sagittarius, Jupiter can reflect destructive indulgence in sensual escapism, or perhaps a holier-than-thou priestly nature that demeans those not of similar beliefs. So Jupiter needs both, pious and adventurous. Pious, maybe I should pick another word for that, but what I mean is sort of humble, spiritual, recognizing that, it's not just me creating this, whatever I'm experiencing. There's a whole universe that's conspiring with me. So I should be pretty humble to that. Okay, so inner to outer. So this is Jupiter to Neptune. The house cusp on Pisces indicates where our larger aspirations and beliefs, Jupiter, will require faith in something greater or higher than ourselves, Neptune. Jupiter's desire for integration leads to Neptune's realm of cosmic oneness. Thus, Jupiter's search for higher meaning is intimately bound with Neptune's search for unification. The key word here is faith. Jupiter in a, say, younger or less developed state, Jupiter is a lot of faith in oneself. I can do it. I can do anything. I can go hitchhiking across India. I'm young, I'm strong, I got all this energy, and I'm so full of myself, I can do anything. Well, of course, that may be true for a while, but then something happens, it doesn't work out. I trip over myself, or just I fall into hard times, and or as it were, fall into some hard knocks. And I can't do it myself anymore, or I can't just break out of it. Really strong Sagittarian types can be really good at just pretending everything's fine. Oh, everything's fine. Oh, come on, let's just laugh and drink and joke around and, whatever. It's no big deal, don't worry about it. But, eventually that Sagittarian energy or that Sagittarian individual will have to face something difficult, and where they can't change it. They can't just will it away. They can't just run away to another country to not deal with it. They have to deal with whatever it is. So then that leads to humility, hopefully. Some humility, and then a process by which that faith transforms. Where hopefully, in a healthy sense, the faith in myself becomes a faith also in life, or we could say in God, or in spirit, or in some idea of a higher nature. The universe is a compassionate being that works with me to always provide for me exactly what I need for my growth. And when it's really hard, well, okay, I accept that because that is part of the adventure or the journey that Jupiter is pointing to. And so, we have to incorporate, again, Jupiter, integration, incorporating things. We have to incorporate those hard experiences, the suffering and the difficulties, the breaking down through old age and all the Saturn stuff, right? We have to experience that and integrate it and say yes to it at some point, at some level, hopefully eventually saying yes. I accept this, I work with it, and I love that I get to have this experience that teaches me something that I couldn't learn any other way. And that brings us to a deeper understanding, feeling, connection with Neptune.
There's that square again here.
Yes, yes.
Between Sagittarius and Pisces.
Yes,
You
absolutely.
have to call to some kind of crisis
Mm-hmm.
to act or to rise above it, assimilate,
Yeah, that great word.
Do
Yeah.
you think it has a connection to them being immutable? I mean, because the other ones aren't this way. You know what I mean?
Maybe.
That's interesting.
It
Okay.
is interesting.
I didn't actually look at that. I'm glad you bring it up. So there's an inherent square between the Jupiter ruled signs. There's a quincunx in the Mars ruled signs, and we call it semi-sex. Well, it's Mercury square. Yeah, okay, yeah, right, of course. I'm remembering the chart I showed earlier.
So there's the tensions and uncomfortableness that the word you use, which I think is really good.
Yeah.
And that way you can't be too settled.
Right.
You have to be alert and,
Yes.
and conscious.
Yes, conscious.
That's developed consciousness, when you're off balance.
I'm wondering if if there's significance to the squaring of the mutables, because the mutables are where we come to analyze what has previously gone. With the cardinal fixed, and now I'm ready to look at what I just did with those in this quadrant kind of thing.
Right. Which is a kind of culmination before letting go, something like that.
Yeah, it's starting over again.
Yeah, right, yeah.
Yeah.
It really is.
Good. I'm going. I'm gonna put some thought into that. That's really good. Yeah. There we go. There you go. Okay.
Expansion.
It's exactly. Get bigger. Just wait till you see Saturn in your eyes.
Cool.
Okay, here come the heavies. Boom. Okay. I need a sound effect with that, Okay. Enough playing around. It's a Saturn. Gotta get serious. Okay, so Capricorn, extant conventions and systems, reality as it is. Aquarius, our dreams for the future, reality as we'd like it to be. That is to say, bringing these signs together is to say that we must have a firm grasp of the world as it is before we can create a better future. Okay, so I'll say a little more about it. The Saturn integration. Without Capricorn, Saturn can become the rebel without a clue. It's a phrase I borrowed from a fellow astrologer, Michael Bartlett. He used that. I don't know if he got it from somewhere, but that's...
Tom Petty, too.
Oh, really? Oh, okay. Here, I thought it was original. Tom. No, he's on to it. Anyway, so rebel without a clue. So that is to say, conforming to groups that preach non-conformance, right? Conforming to non-conformance, right? While asserting an ungrounded radical social order. So I'm talking about Saturn in a purely Aquarian way. An unbalanced Saturn. It's more Aquarius than it is Capricorn. It's tricky because Saturn isn't really revolutionary necessarily. Saturn, though, is structure and is rigidity. And in Aquarius, that's the fixed air. I'm stuck to my ideas. I'm fixed to this idea. But I might be fixed to an idea that is not, that is unconventional. So you think of people who might, maybe they dye their hair, or they got piercings everywhere, some tattoos, whatever. But then you'll notice, and then, how rebellious and radical, but then you'll see the people they're hanging out with all look the same, right? So there's a conformance to non-conformity. So there's still a Saturn conformance happening in Aquarius. And then from that can come, as I say, an ungrounded radical social order. This is Saturn trying to get away from Capricorn.
So what's radical is that it's different from the status quo,
Yes.
but it's not radical in that you're the only one doing it. It becomes the order that will probably become the norm or status quo later.
It could. Perhaps I'm not using the word radical completely correctly. What I mean to say is wildly unconventional. And now that's not to say it's bad, I'm sorry, that's not to say that unconventional is bad or that wildly unconventional is bad. Sometimes, we obviously we can see plenty of examples where it's a good thing. But an ungrounded radical social order is the idea that the whole world should be like Burning Man or something like that. Like Burning Man. Do you know what Burning Man is? Oh, okay. Sorry. It's a festival in the Nevada desert where people come. It's some 70,000 people or something, and they build this little town basically. And it's like anything goes, from total debauchery to high spirituality, like meditation temples and all kinds of like social experiments going on, and then there's all this drinking and drugs and everything. So it's quite an interesting kind of place. And so anyway, I'm digressing. But not exactly a basis for a wider society. It's great for partying. Yeah, and it's wonderful for the experimentation. Yeah, but to assert that it should be something like that should be the new social order would be ungrounded. So, without Aquarius, then where Saturn is far more Capricorn, Saturn can become overly rigid, refusing to bend any rules. And we all know what that looks like, right? Capricorn, the stodgy, old tyrant, and there's whatever, no feeling. Either way, a tyrant emerges. But the thing about Aquarius is, as fixed air, Aquarius can get very detached and be very cold as a result. Lose warmth, lose heart. And that can lead to problems. That can lead to a tyrant, for example. Saturn needs both conformance and innovation. One thing to say about Capricorn Aquarius as Saturn. William Blake in the 18th century wrote about a couple of different, he wrote about several kinds of mythologies. He created his own mythological gods. One of his gods he called Urizen. And Urizen represents the tyrant, the monarch, or the existing, existing power structure that is oppressing the people, or in some ways oppressive. An oppressive, existing power structure. And then one of his other mythological characters, Orc, represents the rebellion against that authority, right? Now he's writing this in the late 18th century when America's in revolution, the French power, the monarchy. But then to his horror, and to many other people's horrors, I think, it turned out that what was rebelling could be just as tyrannical, could be just as violent. And I'm reading a history of the United States right now that's showing that, the framers of the Constitution, and I'm not trying to make any political statement, I'm just saying, in terms of energy balance, there was, the spirit of the revolution, which really was about democratic freedom, but then there was a, quote, excess of democracy, which I think that was James Madison who used that phrase, I can't remember which, but the excess of democracy freaked out the elites, who then came together and said, we got to make a constitution. This Confederation, Articles of Confederation is no good. We got to make a constitution that consolidates government power. And so they did exactly the thing that they fought a revolution against, right? And especially, these, with, the hypocrisy of freedom while owning slaves, or, saying that only rich people should control money, So there were a lot of problems there in that. So what I'm trying to illustrate there is the dynamic of, here's the spirit of revolution, which is orc, saying your reason, the tyrant must go. The revolution happens, but then your reason comes back in some other form. The orc becomes your reason. The rebel becomes the tyrant. Okay? So I said a lot about all that.
There is a theory, I don't remember where I heard this, but a long time ago, the idea that revolutionaries are wonderful for the overthrow, but they're not real good at becoming the government after that. They've probably progressed.
Yes, that seems fitting. Yeah, I'm tying that idea to these dimensions of Saturn, right? And maybe you can see what I mean.
See, here we have the semi-sextile, which many people believe also disconnect. The Capricorn Aquarius.
Yeah.
So there's another tension producing, maybe milder, perhaps.
Right.
Some sort of dissociation.
Yes.
That needs to be synthesized.
Yes.
Or reckoned with for balance.
Yes, I agree. Yeah. What I find is that signs that are adjacent to each other, they almost seem to act as a remedy for the sign that came before. Probably Leo to Virgo is a very
Response against it.
Yes, exactly. Right. So, but if you respond too far and leave out the things that were actually good from the previous cycle, then it could be problematic. Okay. Inner to outer. The house cusp on Aquarius indicates where we must come to understand existing systems and personal conditioning linked with that house before we can awaken to our inner genius, fully realized as a unique being, as Uranus, and work towards the social ideas that truly matter to us. So the image that I have here, we come into life, we have our early life experiences, whatever they may be, and a conditioning occurs, right? We're emotionally conditioned by our parents and by our society and by the media and by the country we live in, whatever. All these conditioning factors come to us, and at some point, and maybe it takes it may take several lifetimes, but at some point, there's an urge to say, wait a minute, I've been told all of this, but maybe this isn't really who I am.
Or it's not true.
Oh yeah, it's not true. Right. Exactly. It's just completely not true. But at the very least, it's not me. Right? And so what does that mean? And particularly if we're given very hard circumstances, then that urge can come up very strongly, and the urge to work through it. And well, who am I really? So what I'd really like to do is decondition, or at least see through the conditioning to get to a more authentic understanding of who I am and what the hell am I doing here. And so we do this work, and that's climbing the mountain. That's climbing the Saturn mountain. The Saturn mountain, referring to the mountain of awakening, the mountain, where we climb to the top to get to that understanding, that Uranian understanding, that Uranian awakening. And it takes a long time, maybe it takes lifetimes, climb that mountain, but then we finally reach the top and poof, you're like a lightning bolt, like a Uranian lightning bolt. Oh, this is it, this is me, this is why I've gone through all of this. Now I remember and I understand. In evolutionary astrology, Uranus is linked with what Jeff Green calls one's divine blueprint. That is to say, the primary archetype of your soul, if you will. And it is that divine blueprint that you're learning how to express by living human life after human life. You're trying to bring that divine blueprint, as it were, into form. The archetype of Uranus into a Saturnine form that has structure, durability, and can carry that energy and express it. So